morning, everybody. I am delighted to be here. When I moved back to Erie in 2013, I looked at different churches and was absolutely intrigued to see that on that particular Sunday, your congregation had the atheists running the service. And I was so tickled pink by this that I called my dad, who's no longer with us, and we came here that Sunday together to hear that service and several more over the past few years. So I'm really honored to be here. So I work for FAMM, and the beautiful thing about FAMM is that we have members from every one of the 62 counties in Pennsylvania. Our members are every color, every political party, every persuasion, every demographic, rural, urban, suburban, you name it. And that is because mass incarceration affects every single county in Pennsylvania. And our focus at FAMM, probably can tell by the name, is families. And so we deal daily with a lot of mothers, fathers, grandparents, sisters, children of people who are incarcerated. Many of them have never told anyone about their loved one's incarceration. Many mothers have been pretending for 20 years that their child is out of town and are so stunted in their healing because of the social stigma around incarceration still, that it's only through finding community at FAMM that they are able to reduce that really searing isolation. So it's a beautiful thing that we try to do in bringing families together, helping people realize that they're not alone and be able to talk about their experiences. And the other beautiful thing about FAMM is that we're nonpartisan, which basically means that the left thinks we're on the right and the right thinks we're on the left. And that's a really wonderful place to be right now because it frees us to actually try to find solutions that work. And so having this nonpartisan lens, no matter what I think or what I get mad about, whichever way that goes, I am forced to look at every single person in good faith and meet them in good faith and believe that they're meeting me in good faith. And that's actually a really lovely thing to do right now. I thought it would be difficult when I came to FAMM a year ago. And it's actually very freeing and lovely because we're so locked into the gridlock right now. So FAMM is national. We work a lot at the federal level, but Pennsylvania is my baby. And that is because the situation here is really so bad in terms of mass incarceration. So I like to say, and you probably have heard, that fish don't see the water that they're swimming in, right? They don't, what's water? I don't even know what water is if I'm a fish, right? And it's the same thing with our punitive culture. So we have been swimming in it for so long that we no longer really see it clearly. And to give you some of the data and some of the numbers, we've brought in our report. It's on the back table. Please take a look at that. And what I mean when I say that we're very punitive is that we put more people in prison than we ever have at any point in our history. If you look at the last 40 years, we've put more people in than at any point in American history in prison. Not only did we put more people in, we kept them there longer. So we put more in, then we made the sentences be longer. And then we also took away all the opportunities on the back end for people to try to find ways to get out, be it compassionate release, earning a second chance through time credits off, whatever the legal mechanism is. Put more in, kept them there longer, took away the opportunities on the back end to get out. So that's where you result in this system of mass incarceration, where we have more people in, historically than ever before. And Pennsylvania, I didn't know, even being from Pennsylvania and working in this space for a long time, that Pennsylvania is actually a national leader in extreme sentencing. So sentences 20 years or longer. We have more than most other places. As of this morning, we had over 36,000 human beings locked in small cells in our state prisons. And that's not just 36,000 individuals, right? Because we are part of I'm reading off your wall, interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. So that is 36,000 families. If you think in your head about the number of people in your life, in your network, think of those 36,000 and those little webs from each of them spreading out in terms of their children, their neighbors, their parents, their grandparents, all of that. And you will see that that web is massive and encompasses the whole state. And that's why we have members in every county. That 36,000 people is not twice or three times what we had in 1970. It's about 7 times what we had then. So it's significant. And that also, by the way, does not include our county jails like the Erie County Prison. It doesn't include federal prisons in Pennsylvania. I'm only talking about state prisons, SCIs, like Albion, like Cambridge Springs throughout the state. So just that system of state prisons, like Albion, like Cambridge Springs, that costs us as taxpayers $3 billion every single year. Every year, we are paying $3 billion just for the state system. So the cost to incarcerate one person for 1 year in SCI Albion or Cambridge Springs is about $50,000. Our minimum wage at a full-time job pays about $15,000, I think $80 or $800, but it's about $15 to $16K a year. And we're spending $50,000 a year to lock up 36,000 people. So you'll do the math and you'll see that's where that $3 billion comes from. So in my opinion, with our minimum wage salary at $15,000, it better be absolutely necessary to lock someone up for that money. Now, when somebody gets old and sick in prison, that cost skyrockets. It goes up closer to $200,000. The last estimate we have is about $182,000 a year when somebody is significantly older in prison and needs personal or skilled care. And we are literally building senior centers and dementia units throughout the state prison system because we have so many old and sick people in prison. So I'm not exaggerating here. We have a neurocognitive dementia unit at Rockview. We have a senior center with a day room at SCI Chester and many other prisons. And why is that? Why are there so many old and sick people in Pennsylvania prisons? I will guess that most of you have heard about, the school to prison pipeline, about, the massive incarcerating crime laws of the 80s and 90s, where we called children super predators and put people away at, again, rates unprecedented in history. What I want to stress is that those children who went in the 80s and 90s at higher than ever rates, they are still there. They're still there in Pennsylvania, and we seem to have forgotten that, except that now they're 30 and 40 years older. They're 50, 60, 70, 80 years old. People in wheelchairs, on dialysis, getting chemo in prison, dying in prison every day. A quarter of our prison population is considered geriatric, and the geriatric term is different in prison. It's younger than it is in free society because people go into prison with more issues. It's an unnatural environment. They have worse medical care. So it's about 50 to 55 is considered geriatric in prison, and that's a correctional standard. So quarter of our prison population, and since 1985, the Department of Corrections has been saying we have too many people coming in. We can't handle this. Even from a systemic institutional standpoint, if you believe all day in that incarceration works, we had our correctional officials saying we can't deal with this. You got to do something. And nobody has listened for 30 or 40 years, and they keep coming in. And now we're at that point of 36,000 people, $3 billion. The racial disparities are horrendous. Black people make up 11% of Pennsylvania's population, but 65% of people serving life sentences. This is shameful. It's shameful. And the important thing I think to understand, and that I'm constantly reminding myself when I look at the data, is that it doesn't track crime. So, you might think, as I thought, well, if crime is going down, maybe that's why the incarceration went up. But we've looked at the charts, we've run the data, we've looked at this repeatedly, so have many other, criminologists and other folks. And you see that crime fluctuates, but stays, kind of like this on a steady arc, although going up and down. Whereas the incarceration rate just goes up since 1980. So this rise is driven by policy choices. It's not driven by crime. And in case you've missed the news lately, it's not working, right? It's not actually addressing crime. Crime is not down. So what we are doing is not working. And we have some major mandatory minimums in Pennsylvania for life imprisonment. So we send, again, more people to prison, life without the possibility of parole than most other places. And we're one of only 6 states that gives no parole opportunities to lifers. And just so that you know, in case you're thinking, well, you have to do something pretty bad to get life, I don't disagree with you. FAMM isn't saying let everybody out tomorrow or that everybody should get out, but we are a state that has some very arcane laws still on the books in which you can get life without the possibility of parole, even if you did not kill anybody or intend to kill anybody, even if it was a nonviolent drug offense, and so on and so forth. And again, we don't give any parole opportunities to these folks ever. So 2 major concerns that we hear a lot are safety and victims. You know, just to assure you, I'm the mother of 2 toddlers. I've been a victim of crime. I live on the Lower West Side of the city. I care deeply about safety. But again, common sense in our data shows that mass incarceration has not made us safer. Because if it did, in the country that incarcerates the most people in the world, and in one of the states in that country, Pennsylvania, that incarcerates the most people in the world, we should be one of the safest places in the world. And that is so far from true. I mean, it's absurd when you look at the return on investment that we're getting for this $3 billion and what we're getting back in terms of, you know, community strength, healing, community safety, prevention. It is laughable. It is not working from any analysis, be it humanitarian, purely financial, risk benefit, any way you slice it, it's not working. So we're not safer. And at this particular time, you know, spending this much money, a fortune of our tax dollars on something that's not working it's really time to stop. So we have families suffering, taxpayers suffering. Victims. One of the biggest things I found in my work with FAMM is that victims are not a monolith. Just like any other group, we have to keep learning this about every group that we talk about, right? Be it men and women, be it races, be it survivors or victims of crime. So I work with many victims of crime who come with me to legislative meetings and say, the number one thing that I want is for this to never happen to anyone else again. And what's happening as a result of my victimhood, or what happened to me, is not making anyone safer. Do something that works. This is not honoring me. It's not honoring the deceased. It's not honoring anybody to continue to perpetuate this broken system. So do all victims feel that way? Absolutely not. Do some victims want somebody to stay in prison forever? Absolutely. Should their voices be heard regardless of what they want? Absolutely. And so what I want to stress is that, you know, again, no group is a monolith. And so don't be quick to assume that everybody wants the same thing. Not everybody who has survived crime wants never-ending punitive punishment. That is simply not the case. And so what we advocate for is individualized, thoughtful case-by-case analysis in every case, and for redemption and second chances to be built into the system. And so big picture, what that means is that we go from a place where right now, if you're sentenced, you know, the judge will and the entire system will basically take a snapshot of you on that day of sentencing. If that's today, they'll take a picture of me, you know, today, and that's it. That's it, just today. That's all I am as a human being. That's all you are. If you're the victim in the case, that's all you are. If you're the prosecutor on the case, it's only that one day frozen in time. And I don't need to tell you that's just not how humans work. So I'm sure, you know, my mom in the back here could rock you with some stories of things I did when I was 15 and 22. I'm sure you could, you know, as well. We do stupid things when we're young. Our brains aren't done developing. This isn't rocket science to anyone that's had kids, you know, it's pretty obvious. And yet we continue to perpetuate this system where we just freeze everyone in time. And not only do the defendants or the accused or the imprisoned change over time, many of them, but so do victims' positions, so do prosecutors' positions, so do society's positions. So basically our big picture is to go from a system where you freeze in time on the day of to a system where we would have regular reviews of people and sentences with more built-in opportunities for healing, for programming, for rehabilitation. And so instead of just stopping, we want to see cases come back to every so often, not every day, not every week, not every year. It could be, really right now in Pennsylvania, we're talking about sentence review after 30 years. That's kind of the political will in Pennsylvania right now, and we're even having trouble with that. In Washington, D.C., they just passed a law, they're their own little territory. They just passed a law saying regular review after 10 to 15 years. You can apply. Doesn't mean you're going to get out. It's not automatic. All you're doing is applying to have a conversation about whether and how much you have grown as a person, and whether it is still worth our tax dollars to lock you up, whether people's positions have changed, whether we are in fact safer for keeping you incarcerated. And so that's basically what second look sentencing is, right? It's just revisiting things. It's just not locking people into a black and white photo that holds for the rest of their life until they die. That's really all it is. And so there's more about that in our materials in the back. I do want to stress before I run out of time, the family impact. As I said, we have thousands of members, moms, dads I talk to every day. My cell phone is in the back. Feel free to call me, text me, email me anytime. Give it to anyone that you know who has, interest or personal distress or anything over this issue. And so again, 1 in 2 adults has experienced incarceration in their families. And there's a lot of things we can do to quantify that. We talk a lot about the tax implications. If someone goes away, they're not saving for retirement. They're not there to help take care of their elders. There's a single parent. The stress, the compounding, loss to finances, that's a lot. But it's much darker than that. And so when you look at that web of 36,000 people and you think about, the impact of losing your father for most of your life, right? Like in that story that we had for kids, you think about not being able to hug your dad. You think about not being with your mom while she's dying. You think about not being able to hear those little things that your kids tell you, when you're riding in the car and they tell you about a tough time that they're having. None of that, none of the daily victories, family emergencies, illnesses. You can't parent, you can't share a bed, you can't share a meal, your whole life is different. And this really is living torture to the families that experience it, families who did not do anything wrong, mothers and children who do not deserve that, right? And so having been an attorney in the system for over a decade in multiple states in the United States, I can say one of the biggest fictions of the system is this individualistic concept that you did something wrong. This is all your fault. I don't care about your kids or your family. You did it. You suffer the consequences. If anybody is harmed, it's on you because you messed up, right? That's what we tell ourselves working in the system. And that's what I think I unconsciously told myself that too when I was working on it. I can't go too far down the path of how this is going to hurt everyone in your life, and you did something bad, right? You're standing here, you did something bad. I can just blame it all on you. That's easy. And what we've done as a society and as a legal system and as people working in it who want to sleep at night is ignore that interdependent web. Right? And so we have ignored this incalculable harm, this trauma that comes from ghosting people from their own lives, just disappearing them forever from people's lives, right? Not saying you shouldn't be held accountable, not saying you shouldn't have punishment, not saying you shouldn't even go to prison. And we must also consider this harm now that has spread of disappearing people from their lives and taking them from their families with no review, with no incentive for growth, with nobody caring if you are rehabilitated, right? We need to do both and now, and we can do that. It's hard to deal with nuance. It's hard to make policy for nuance, but that is what we're trying to do. And so one of the beautiful things that we've done in my time at FAMM is we worked a lot with the Office of the Victim Advocate. They are not wholesale opposed to our concepts. What they would like to see is some of the savings from that immense amount of money go into real trauma recovery on the front end so that we can prevent crime. So I think that is the short version. I'm probably just about done on time. I have so much more I could say, and I think the last thing that I'll say is just if you are wary or don't know how this will work, rest assured we have already done it. So you may have heard of the juvenile lifers in Pennsylvania, many of whom got the chance to be resentenced after some landmark Supreme Court decisions. We have some phenomenal former juvenile lifers here in Erie, including Antonio Howard, who's a community muralist who does things all over town. You may have read about him in the paper or met him. They were allowed a second chance opportunity. They are out. They have the lowest recidivism of any criminal cohort literally ever heard of in the world. These are all people convicted of very serious crimes who grew up. It's 30 years later, 40 years later. I don't think there's any real argument that they didn't pay their debt after decades and decades and decades in prison. And they are now doing real peace work, anti-violence work, community building here in Erie and beyond. So I'm happy to talk to anybody about any of this or anything related. Again, my cell phone is in the back. Please reach out anytime. Thank you so much for having me.